What's the difference between health risk and safety risk? Well, it's not difficult to spot a safety risk, is it? Getting a wheelchair onto a train has obvious safety risks, but that surely is a health risk. Brenda, you've just been off with back problems. We don't want to do your back again. Get some help, will you?
It's all right. This is a lighter version. It's fine.
Well, anyway, that still could be a health risk. Oh, is this yours? Working here without a hard hat is a safety risk, but you can get vibration-white fingers from the use of tools like this. Now that is a health risk. So, maybe you should share that work with someone else, man.
You're like my girlfriend, you are. Knock, knock, knock.
You try to help. Right. The lads are on top of it. Give it an hour. Identifying health risks isn't rocket science, but it does need input from colleagues across the business. And that really is the point. Knowing you can call on skills from other departments. People that... Phil, posture. That's painful to watch, that is.
Posture? I'm up to my eyeballs in deadlines here. The phone never stops ringing.
And that, my friends, is stress with a capital H for heart attack. It's about anticipating, planning ahead. Drivers are expected to be on top of their game. And most don't complain about the responsibility, but well, if the seat, well, if that's not right, what do you expect? After a while, that's when you start to notice it. Could be the chair or maybe back problems. These aren't safety issues, but it could be a health risk. Now here's a place that definitely offers some health risks. We tend to think about safety risks first, but health risk is just as important. With all the oil, chemicals and other fumes floating about, how clean is the air? Oh, Andy, long day.
As usual, off in a minute though. Yeah, if it gets too much, I'll pop outside for a breath of fresh air.
Very sensible. It may mean nothing, but it doesn't hurt to check. That is what health risk is all about. There are many other health risks all around us. Whether it's vibration, noise, stress, working with other departments, and supported by this simple guidance. Make assessing health risk part of your long-term planning.
Line managers don't need to be technical experts in the field of health and well-being. What they are required to do, and you're required to do, is to understand the tasks that your workers are required to undertake as part of their duties. And then with the simple application of tools and assessments that we're going to discuss and outline in this briefing, you can then understand how to assess the risks and potentially well-being issues to which your staff are exposed. It's basically about formalising a degree of common sense. The aims of this session are very straightforward. The first is to identify and discuss the three main aspects of health and well-being assessment. We will also understand the simple step-by-step process that you as a line manager will be required to follow in assessing workplace risk. And by doing this, we recognise the practical things we can do that can protect and enhance the health and well-being of ourselves and others we work with. Just standing back and taking a fresh look at things can often mean we can find quicker, smarter and healthier ways of working that cost nothing other than a thought and willingness to help. It's very easy to understand that working on the railway, the health and well-being of an individual can have a direct effect on their ability to do their job. However, it needs to be equally well understood that their job can have an effect on their long-term health and well-being. So carrying out a health and well-being assessment helps us understand our workplace and the people within it in order to make it a better place to work. The role of the line manager is vital. You have the most experience of managing everyday tasks. If you don't identify and raise issues, there is a chance they may be missed altogether. Let's take a look at a few examples of typical health and well-being issues that are relevant in today's railway.
The hazards associated with the welding aspect of it, we are looking at the health hazards of the fumes given off. And what fumes are given off, you know, we know the makeup of the rail has got all sorts of different components in there, but when you're adding something to it by the metal within the rods when you're welding, does that react with the metal that's in the rail, with the iron, or is it going to give off a different fume or different component that we're not sure of? So, well, the main issues we're going to have is with respiratory illnesses. I think that's the main thing we need to be looking at here.
One of the main health risks for my workforce is from work-related stress. Now, all this research shows that work is good for you. Work pressure is good for you. In fact, work pressure will never go away. When we talk about work-related stress, what we're actually talking about is making sure that those pressures never get to the point where they're causing ill health symptoms. In other words, we don't want things to tip over into ill health.
Our biggest health risk currently with multi-purpose stone blowers are the fact that we have a number of safety issues which lead into the health problems. We have to wear hard hats, we have to wear eye protection, we have to wear dust protection, and we have to wear noise protection. So as a result of that, we have health issues relating to dust, noise, and objects. Our biggest issue was that many years ago, we'd done a vast amount of noise assessment, which actually said we weren't doing too bad from a safety point of view. Okay, but it was only when one of our guys went for a medical, his driver's medical, and he came back with a reduction in his hearing capacity, did we think that we've now got a bigger issue here? What's going wrong? So we went back and reviewed what we did then, and we found that although we'd come up with some PPE, I solved the safety issue, the PPE was wrong for the task. And the guys, when they're out on the machine, have to wear a communication kit, as well as wearing eye protection and headwear. Coupled with dust, as a result of blowing stone into the ground, dust comes up, another health issue. We've now got a guy that dresses up in a spacesuit.
We've got multiple health risks. We obviously have lots of people using tools that have vibrations, that have noise. We have people who may be going out and becoming exposed to asbestos or lead potentially. And then we also have health opportunities, which are we recognise that people aren't necessarily as active as they could be, that there are higher levels of stress than are necessary for good performance, and that people's diets, their recovery, their sleep, again, all have areas of development. So I think it's we tend to look at it as opportunities rather than risks in those areas.
Well, clearly with train crew, people, especially drivers, are in a fairly confined space in a train cab and on a train seat for a considerable number of hours each day and for several days at a time. And sitting anywhere in that space and having to reach for various controls, etc., has its difficulties and presents some people with some issues.
There's occupational health risks really, regarding working with chemicals, there's manual handling, there's stress, there's hand-down vibration, there's noise, it's quite a big heavy industry out there.
It can start from the point of referral, so a manager has identified that there's a health issue with the individual, and this can either be that they've come absent from work, either short-term or long-term. It can be that they notice there's a change in the way that they're able to do their job role and their tasks at work. It could be a change in behaviour. So the first thing that the manager would do would be to send a management referral online to the occupational health team, where upon receipt an appointment will be made to be assessed by one of the clinicians.
So what is health and well-being assessment? There are three main aspects to health and well-being assessment. Looking at diagram 1 opposite, you'll see that the three main elements relating to the workplace have been represented by the coloured circles. It's the overlap of each adjacent pair of circles that represents the key areas for managers to focus on in relation to health and well-being assessment. Let's take a closer look at these. On initial inspection, this may appear complex, but the aim of health and well-being assessment is to follow a simple process to identify health hazards in the workplace, assess potential risks to health, and determine appropriate ways of informing others. This needs to be focused on protecting and, where possible, enhancing the health and well-being of people we work with. It's very important to be aware that you are not needing to tackle these issues alone. In fact, you'll achieve much better results by working alongside others, especially with someone who works in the environment concerned on a day-to-day basis. Health and well-being assessment needs to be a partnership between managers, frontline workers, and occupational health advisors, each bringing their knowledge, experience, and skills to support the process. The first overlap seen here is between the individual and the job. We need to assess the job activities. By this, we mean looking at the impact of activities relevant to a number of workers carrying out similar tasks. The second overlap is between the individual and the organisation. We need to assure individual fitness by looking at helping an individual continue working within their own capabilities and circumstances. And the third overlap between the organisation and the job itself suggests we protect and enhance employee well-being. This could be looking at helping understand psychological issues, working conditions, and helping reduce undue stresses as far as possible. So it's these areas that we need to be aware of, monitor, and be prepared to respond to in our daily working lives. When you apply a health and well-being assessment in your workplace, it's useful to have these in mind. Now take some time to consider your own circumstances at work and think about examples that relate to each of the three areas we have just discussed. We will now look at the simple process that can help us clarify an issue as well as identifying how it can be solved. The starting point for identifying the need may be proactive, in that it's either a new activity or a planned review, or it might be reactive in that an individual has reported an issue, or it may be due to an incident or accident. From there, we can look further into the issue in a systematic way. The diagram here sets out a simple, common sense, 5-step set of questions for us to answer. Following this process, a step at a time, can help us clarify an issue as well as identifying how it can be resolved. Firstly, what are the health issues? We need to understand what people do, what they're exposed to, and how this may affect their health and well-being. Secondly, who does this apply to? Clarify who might be affected by the health issues and the effect it may have. Third, how serious is it? Evaluate the risks and consider both the consequences and the frequency, and then decide whether there is a need for additional action. Fourth, what needs to be done? Decide what needs to be done about the issue. Think about the controls you have in place and how the work is organised. Compare this with good practice and see if there's more that can be done. Make sure you record your assessment. And finally, are the controls working? Regularly review the assessment and controls and update if necessary. This may be due to plan change, review timescales, or something else that's altered. We will now look at a few examples of how other rail businesses are seeking to use the 5-step model before going on to look at each of the steps in more detail.
The MPS guys are probably most affected by this because they need the communications equipment to provide them with the hearing protection, as well as that they need the dust protection so that they don't get problems with their lungs.
They put test pads on us when we're actually out working to find out what contaminants there were in the stone and to find out the dangers that posed to operators outside.
The noise is the biggest issue currently, and that is partly to do with the weather. The weather obviously affects the dust. So at the moment, the dust levels are low. In fact, the dust levels are so low that the guys aren't actually wearing dust protection. But the noise issue, we have now got 3 people that have noise-induced hearing loss. So therefore, we need to do something different. So that's a major issue. As a result of that, I looked at 2 industry suppliers, one supplying noise equipment, communication equipment and noise attenuation, and another company that provided respiratory equipment. So we brought those 2 companies together with the guys out in the field where they trialled what they had to offer in terms of their products. And we came up with one solution which actually provides all the protection for noise, dust, eye protection, head protection, and also provides other benefits as well in terms of giving us good communication and hands-free. So we've gone from 5 or 6 pieces of PPE down to basically 1 from 2 companies.
We've come up with the blown air system, which is now by far a better thing to use and more comfortable, easier to put on, less preparation, and it can be kept on throughout the shift.
It's smart technology because all the time that it's working, it senses what's going on around. So as the sound comes in, it bounces sound back out again. So the problem has gone away. Not only that, but as a result of giving just 1 piece of PPE for these guys to wear, it means that it's easier, it's more comfortable, yeah? And the ongoing effect is that noise-induced hearing loss should not be a problem with this machine again. So we're coming towards the ends of our trials, but the initial reports is that it's made a big impact. We'll still have a process of monitoring the guys for noise-induced hearing loss, and that will continue for the next 2 years.
With the new gear, people are more than happy to wear it and spend as long out in the dust as they need to get the job done.
The biggest thing for me is that the guys who are using this equipment on a day-to-day basis say it's just changed the way that they work. Not only is it safer, but it's better for their health as well.
So different people are affected to different risks in our organisation. We have lots of frontline workers. They're the people who do hard jobs day in, day out, where they might be exposed to, again, tools that vibrate or lots of noise or potentially dust and silica and other respiratory issues. So from a risk and a hazard perspective, we've got many thousands of those people. But then from a more general lifestyle perspective, in terms of their physical well-being, their mental well-being, that affects virtually everyone. So most people have areas of improvement. So some of them, like hand-arm vibration syndrome, which is caused if someone has excessive exposure to vibrations, well, that can cause the loss of the use of the fingers, the hands, pain, disability for the rest of their life. We obviously have the risk that people might be exposed to asbestos or asbestosis, mesothelioma and respiratory diseases. We're going to have people who become deaf if the level of noise they're exposed to just aren't controlled. At the same time, the lifestyle factors, we know that the people who are sedentary have a much higher risk of heart disease, of cancer, of diabetes. Stress is a risk factor for, again, cardiovascular disease, but it also affects the foods I want to eat, the activity I'm willing to do. So actually, again, the risks from these are quite significant. So one of the key things I think the industry as a whole need to improve their understanding of, but also make sure people understand the benefits of, and that's how well people take part in health surveillance. So health surveillance are tools or services that are used to help to identify whether someone might be being harmed from the work they do. So if we take hand-arm vibration syndrome, it could be a health questionnaire that gets sent out once a year asking if they have any tingling or numbness in their fingers. And again, taking part in health surveillance is really important for people because, again, again, the earlier we can identify problems, the earlier we're able to help modify the work that they do to keep them in their job. And actually, if people don't go through health surveillance, if they shy away from it because they're potentially nervous, then it makes it actually more likely that they'll get to a stage where less can be done for them and less support can be offered. So actually really taking part in health surveillance measures which organisations fund for them, it is really important for the individual because it's our way of helping to keep them in their job day in, day out. The issue is that people don't necessarily see the immediate benefits of filling out another questionnaire or going for an assessment, or they might feel nervous about, well, what happens if the result comes back and it's not great. But again, the reality is that these services are put in place to protect the health of our people. They are there to make sure that any issues that are creeping up, we can absolutely support them. We can make sure that they get seen by a health professional to give them some advice. And so actually helping these people to take part is fundamentally what my role is there to support. But at the same time, there is a responsibility for each individual person to take part in it as well. So we do this for their benefit, but again, there is a personal responsibility that every one of us has for our own health and well-being. And health surveillance is a core part of what we need to do as an industry. I think one of the things that came out loud and clear was there was a huge amount of commitment from our people to our organisation, and that came out loud and clear. So that was a really positive finding. And it really does come back to the point that people want to feel like they have a sense of purpose in what they do, that their role plays a part in the bigger picture. And again, that's something that we heard loud and clear, is people saying, I want to understand what part I'm playing in the success of the organisation. We identified that 35% of people said they exercised frequently. And what was really interesting is that those people who said, I exercise frequently, reported their performance as being 3% greater than those people who said, I exercise infrequently or only occasionally. Now that's important because one of the hardest things for health professionals to do, people like myself, is to build a business case for health, where people actually say, well, what is the benefit of me paying for this service? Well, actually, if I can improve everyone's performance by 3% through making them exercise or helping them to exercise, then that is millions of pounds in better performance each year. So that was a really interesting finding as well.
People were the welders, the guys out on the track doing the welding, where you've got a problem with the rail, where you need to maybe cut it out and re-weld it or rejoin the rail. So they were the individuals concerned that would have concerns about the welders. Well, they can be very serious, and I think this is what some of the studies were showing. People who had had long-term exposure to welding fumes were suffering respiratory illnesses, lung illnesses. So we needed to look into what were the main risks associated with this for our employees. We decided we need to commission some work to actually do some monitoring, occupational health monitoring, to understand what hazards they were associated with the welding activities. I decided to use the National Track Material Recycling Centre here in Whitemoor, because it's an area where they undertake all the tasks. They do the different types of welding, grinding, different types of hot cutting. They have used rail here, new rail here, manganese coated rail here. Basically, it's a one-stop shop for everything that we needed. We did 49 tests over 2 days. The guys wore monitors on the lapels, which is as close as we can get to the actual mouth, so we can the nose, so we can actually see what they was breathing in. We did it inside the facility. The idea of doing all the work inside as well. So whatever we did outside, we did inside. I utilised the experience and knowledge of the welders down here, and Richard Oliver, who's the S&C quality manager. They've got years of experience doing this on trackside, so utilised their experience and knowledge. They told me what happened, so we monitored what happens, not what maybe I perceived to happen. So we did the burning outside, and then we did the burning inside, so we used oxypropane, oxyacetylene, to try and work out what the hazards associated both were. We're looking more on a risk-based approach to PPE, in effect. We need to identify what the hazards are. We need to do a proper assessment Although I think sometimes we need to move away from assessments because it scares people, but assessments are quite simple things to do. We do them every day when we cross the road. We do them every day when we jump in his car. It's not a dark art to do an assessment. It's an opinion that you're going to have and what the consequences are, what the likelihood of them consequences are. Is it working? I would say at the moment we've got some way to go, but not a long way to go. We have a starting point now where we have some figures, and I think the figures are very positive. Certain people have already had the report sent to them so they can start looking through it and reviewing it, so they can see that the hazards out there associated with welding are maybe not quite as serious as we first imagined they were.
I lead 5 teams of 30 people out of about 250 who work for ORR as a whole. Some of my people travel to Europe to be involved in negotiations with our European colleagues. Others are involved in inspecting the railway directly, looking at human factors issues or railway operations, and others are office-based. Work-related stress, why should we bother about it? Why am I bothered about it? The reason is that I do not want to lose any of my staff to long-term sick. That would have negative effects on the productivity of my teams for a start, but as well as the ill health that they would suffer, which is not something I want on my conscience, to be honest. We based our approach on the HSE stress management standards, which are available on their website. These standards set out practical benchmarks for areas of managing your people that you need to get right in order to avoid positive work pressure tipping over into stress-related ill health. The 6 areas that they cover are the demands on people from their workload, control, the degree of control they have over that workload, the support that they have from their colleagues, the relationships with their colleagues, the role that they perform, do they understand it, and change management. And all these 6 areas together, if we get them right, give us a good practical way of controlling work-related stress. From my point of view, what I want to see from my managers is that they're paying attention to managing each of the 6 areas in the management standards day in, day out. I don't particularly want to see particular action points being delivered, because this is so much about day-to-day management of people and being aware of the things that you have to get right in order to achieve good management of the stress and work pressures that people are under. So I then take any feedback that I hear from staff and we feed that into another discussion, perhaps at a later managers meeting. So is it working? Is it worthwhile? Should we bother? I think in these particularly tough times that we've got, people are under financial pressures, pressures at home, pressures at work, every business is having generally to make cutbacks. Do these standards actually help? I believe that they do, and the reason I believe they do is because they help us to actually discuss those areas. We don't hide them, we actually bring them out, talk about them, and we might not be able to solve them all completely, but we have and are able to identify the things that we can do to make things better. And that's what it's about, trying to get improvement.
We've got about 950 drivers. Obviously there are those who there's no effect whatsoever. In fact, probably the majority. But a number do experience some difficulties. We've got various different fleets of rolling stock. Some have different difficulties with different fleets. Some find seats uncomfortable, sometimes the depression of the foot pedal is uncomfortable, sometimes the reach to various controls is uncomfortable. And of course there's a big difference between feeling uncomfortable and any potentially more serious issues like back strains or any other sort of musculoskeletal problems. People have varying different degrees of discomfort or not with driving cabs. They're obviously a very difficult thing to change because they're within the fabric of the makeup of the vehicle itself, and there are certain controls and equipment that you need to fit into a cab. So we're working with quite a limited, quite a limited scope for change, really. If a number of your drivers or any other members of staff come and say they have some issues, I think the important thing is to step back, understand what their issues are. What we did on Southern was to employ an ergonomics specialist. We're not expert in this field. It's quite a complex field, much more complex probably than I thought when we started. But the ergonomics specialist is able to take all sorts of measurements of cabs, view people at work using video, mock up various scenarios and have people test them out. And of course, our 950 drivers are of all different shapes and sizes, and that presents some difficulty in itself. I think if we're honest, will we ever have something that completely satisfies everyone? Maybe not. Our important, end result is to have something that is suitable for the highest number of people we can. One of the interesting things that came out of that survey was that actually over 98% of our drivers had never had any briefing, training or suggestions as to how best to sit, their posture. So we spent a considerable time putting together a DVD with our ergonomics specialist around posture and how best to adjust the seat on various fleet and how best to sit in that seat. And also some exercises to do. If you travel on aircraft, especially long haul, quite often you'll be asked to do some exercises to keep your blood circulation going and just generally keep yourself in shape. And it's no different on a train, but to be fair, we hadn't really told our train crew that. So we put together a DVD with all that on, issued it to every member of every driver with a letter. And the really important thing I should say is all the way through this, we were involving the union. So it was a real joint approach, and indeed the letter that went with the DVD was jointly issued from the company and the union representatives to ensure that everybody had complete buy-in to it. The DVD has sections for each of the types of fleet that we operate. So you can quickly navigate your way around and only look at the parts that are relevant to yourself. Is it working? It's a bit early to say. What I would say is that the whole project thus far has driven a completely different specification for the latest train that we're ordering. I think it's important to recognise there's only so much that a company can do, and like anybody, whether you're a driver or any other role you perform, there's certainly an element of your own personal responsibility to ensure your general level of fitness and your suitability for the environment you're going to be working in. Ultimately, we all want the same thing. We all want a safe railway that people are happy in the environment they're operating in. So it's a big issue, but take it steadily and take specialist advice would be my suggestion.
We've got maintenance guys and girls, we've got operational staff, we've got office staff, obviously we've got external contractors, we've got managed stations, there's public get involved. What brought about all this regarding health and health fairs, one of the guys at Wakefield, he had an heart attack while he was on site, which was quite obviously distressing for him and his family, and all this so distressing for the guys he worked with. When I went and saw his family at Wakefield, Pinderfields Hospital, it really tugged on heartstrings really. It's like, what can we do to guys? What can we offer more support for us guys out there? So, working with colleagues, we came up with the idea of health fair, which is quite a number of workshops. We were looking at people's blood pressure, general health issues. We look at healthy eating habits. We look at basically we've got a lot to do with cancer, and they were coming and doing workshops. We also had the fitness course, strength, healthy exercises, and we also got a firm in called Care First who spoke to guys regarding counselling issues and what offer support we can give as guys.
I was talking to some of the lads I work with and they were a bit apprehensive, but since they've been, they've been really fantastic, positive, really positive.
Do you think it'll make a difference to some of them, some changes in lifestyle maybe?
Yes, I think it will, because one of the chaps I work with, he had really raised blood pressure.
The beauty about organising a health fair, if you go to your NHS local, there's a lot of companies out there who will come in and deliver health and wellbeing workshops for free. So basically you need a resource. Obviously you need a resource for the 5 workshops or whatever workshops you want to do on the day. You need a resource to keep the day running, your admin costs, whatever. But an health fair generally for Network Rail, it costs anything from £100, £200 to £3,000 or £4,000 for the day. Staff and members who came to these health fairs were split into 5 workshops, healthy workshops. So there were 15 per workshop, so we had 75 attendees in the morning and 75 attendees in the afternoon. At the moment, it's more maintenance staff and office staff and works delivery guys, but we're hoping to push it out into investment project teams and as operational colleagues as well over the next 2 years. The response from the health fairs from the colleagues has been absolutely fantastic. We had some really positive feedback in regards to how it's changed their lives. Really, they've started looking at the diet, the exercise. We've even got guys now that said I went out and bought a dog, and I'm doing 3 or 4 miles a day. So and he's lost 3 stone by just doing that. We've had quite a lot of leg pulling between the younger guys and the older guys, but to be fair, all ages, all sexes, they've all embraced it and really took it forward. They've been brilliant.
I think line managers should be mindful that when they're talking to employees about health issues, that it is from a colleague-to-colleague perspective and not as a friend-to-friend, as this can often set the wrong footing. I think it's important to remain professional, and then you gain the trust and confidence that will then allow the employee to engage and communicate openly with you about the health issue.
A line manager should think when approaching an employee about a health or wellbeing issue is the first thing to not be afraid to address the issue. It's about opening up dialogue, it's about sensitivity when you're talking to your employee, it's about having the conversation in the appropriate place, so a time when it's private, that the employee's got time to speak and feel secure that they can disclose issues that are going on in their life.
A line manager should be aware that there are support and services out there other than occupational health. If the health condition is more serious than first anticipated, we have employee assistant programmes in place, and also we have the ability to refer to a third-party specialist for private referral if that is deemed necessary.
In essence, the line manager has an essential role in helping the employee within the workplace. They are the interface between the employee, the occupational health department, the human resource employment law, and it's about making sure that channels of communication are kept open.
There may be situations where the individual doesn't like the recommendations that are made by the occupational health department. However, it is important at the very outset, at the management consultation, that the process is outlined to the employee so they understand what is expected of them and what they need to expect from the occupational health department with regards to guidance in the management of their condition and getting them to return to work.
This all falls back into the importance of communication. This falls back into the importance of ascertaining before the employee is sent for the advice, and also early discussions about return to work and looking at any anxieties that the individual may have on return to work, so that you can put in a plan to help smoothly transition the individual back to work.
Now take some time to consider this 5-step process in your own circumstances at work, and you will see that common sense applies throughout. Taking the first step, we consider what are the health risks. Here we aim to consciously look around and identify issues that may adversely affect the health and well-being of people in the workplace. It is important that we are able to stand back from time to time and view things that are going on from a wider perspective, whilst holding the aim of improving the health and well-being of our people firmly in mind. There are a number of practical things that you can do. Set time aside to look at what health issues may be affecting your workplace. Look at things you're used to seeing through fresh eyes. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. This technique can help see things that have become unconscious or invisible because we're so used to seeing them. Consciously look out for early signs of ill health caused by work. Bear in mind that some health conditions may take a long time to show. Listen to what the people around you say. Sometimes it's worth picking up on somebody's throwaway line to see if there is more to something than initially meets the eye. Appreciate that some issues may have been around for a long time and may seem difficult to solve, but they are present and need to be recognised. Other thoughts and consideration. Walk around the workplace and talk to people that work there. Discussion and insight from trusted and experienced employees can often be very revealing. Liaise with your specialist health and safety managers for advice and to look at generic risk assessments carried out for the activities concerned. Have a look back at your accident and ill health records. These often help to identify the less obvious hazards. Remember to consider that long-term exposure to minor hazards can be far more serious compared to occasional exposure, for example, high levels of noise or exposure to harmful substances. The second step is considering who this applies to. We need to consider the scale of a health and well-being issue and also who might be affected over a period of time. However, when we have learnt about a health and well-being issue, it is important we consider whether it's an isolated case or if it is likely to apply to others as well. A few practical things you can do are: if an issue has been identified through an individual matter, consider whether it may also apply to others carrying out similar work. If you share your workplace, think about how your work affects others, as well as how their work affects your people. Talk to them and ask your people if they can think of anyone you may have missed. Keep talking to people. It is better to talk through issues and make a few mistakes rather than ignore problems. Listen to issues raised and understand the problem before worrying about how to resolve it. Other thoughts and issues are that if looking at a group issue, are certain individuals more vulnerable? Remember that the most vulnerable people, particularly those with existing health conditions or expectant mothers, for example, are more likely to suffer harm and will therefore need greater protection from it. Next, we consider how serious the issue is. Here we aim to recognise and evaluate the implications of what is happening so we can respond in an appropriate and timely manner. It is important to make sure we look into the issue in enough depth so we can make good decisions and move forward in a manner that is reasonable rather than doing too much or not enough. Practical things you can do in considering the seriousness of the issue are: if you are not sure how serious something is, you have the option to seek the help of specialists through the relevant department of your organisation, such as your occupational health hygienists, health and safety representatives, or search on the internet, or review documents that are available to you within your organisation, or you can talk to others. Are there examples of good or useful practice? Other things you can do: speak about the issue to people doing the work to understand what's going on. Keep gathering information until it becomes clear how you should act. Make decisions based upon the information you have in front of you. Consider whether you need to action some quick fixes to protect people whilst longer-term solutions are considered. And consider whether the work environment can be improved so that it becomes a more enjoyable place of work. Critically, we then consider the fourth step, what needs to be done. Aim to take action that is realistic, achievable and effective in improving the health and well-being of our people. Look at what is already happening. Think about the things that are in place and how the work is organised. We can then compare this with common sense and any known good practice. This will enable us to see if there's more that can be done. Here are just a few of the practical things you can do. Share what you've found with those that need to know, such as other employees and safety reps. Get others involved with deciding the best way forward. You could create an informal team with mixed experience and perspectives to help talk through practical ideas and options. Prioritise what needs to be done. Take account of practicalities and legal obligations. Imagine what it will look like if the changes are working well. Mentally rehearse ideas for solutions along with their long-term implications through discussion with others concerned. Manage expectations of those involved or concerned. It is more likely to be evolution rather than revolution. And write down an outline plan using each of the 5 steps as a heading. Other thoughts and considerations. Can we get rid of the issue altogether? If not, how can we control the issue so that any potential harm is minimised? In the case of issues that are undermining well-being, such as stress, it is often most useful for those experiencing the issue to suggest ways the pressure can be reduced to a sustainable level. And finally, within any plan, you may find you need to have temporary quick fixes as well as solutions that may take longer to put in place. Many health and well-being controls are long-term issues. However, we need to assess whether what we're doing is working. Aim to review what you have done so that you can better understand what has worked well, what can be improved, and what may need changing in the future. After taking action to implement changes to address a health and well-being issue, it is important to take a little time to look back on whether our plan worked in practice. Examples of the practical things you can do are: check progress against your plan from step 4. Keep an eye on the effect of any changes made. It can be useful to set yourself a reminder on your calendar or phone. Other thoughts and considerations could be: add in health and well-being assessment checks that can be carried out at the same time as other company procedures, such as planned inspections. Be prepared to adapt and improve the plan to accommodate practical experience. Reviewing the health and well-being assessments annually will make sure we're still improving, or at least not sliding back. So in conclusion, when it comes to using the 5 steps within the organisation, how much effort each step takes will depend upon the difficulty of managing the issue identified. It may be that for simple issues, the 5 steps can be carried out by a few people without much effort. But for more complex issues, it may be it will take a number of colleagues to work together to resolve the issue. Either way, the line manager's role is vital to start the process off. Within the 5-step process, it is really the first 2 steps where line managers make all the difference. The other steps may or may not need other people, but if the line manager does not initiate the process, the organisation will struggle to address its weaknesses. If you do nothing else, be aware of your important role in steps 1 and 2 of the health and well-being assessment process and be prepared to start them off. As we mentioned earlier, the role of the line manager is key. It's you that has the most experience of everyday tasks.
The aim of this resource is twofold. Firstly, we want to be aware of the importance of health and our responsibility to look after our health. Secondly, employers have a responsibility to protect their workers' health by identifying, managing, controlling risk. Line managers can have a big impact on this area. They know their staff, they know the work activities their staff have to carry out. It's a case of stopping and thinking about what we do, how we do things, and what it is that we can do to improve their situation so that they're not exposed to so much fume, to dust. They're not lifting or pushing heavy loads if they don't need to. The Health and Wellbeing resource is an awareness tool. It isn't the end point. that we're on a long journey here, and this is just the start. There's going to be other resources that will build on this in the future. So this is to get people started on identifying those health risks and making sure that you feel confident that you can do something about it. A health risk assessment is all about stopping and thinking about what your staff are exposed to, identifying those dusts, those fumes, those chemicals, what it is that makes their job hard. It's identifying what you can do to improve the situation. By that, you're managing and controlling the risks. And it's your responsibility as a line manager to try and make those assessments so that their health is not affected. The advice I would give to line managers is to be aware of those things that can have an impact on your staff's health. Try and identify what you can do to manage those risks and start making those small steps. A lot of it is common sense, but it's important to start making those small incremental steps, because in the long term you'll actually make quite significant improvement.
Please be aware this is just one resource in a suite of information that is available to help you and your team. The DVD contains more detailed versions of the case studies, along with resources such as posters, training and briefing plans. Thank you very much for taking part in the session. You may now wish to consider any final questions or discussion points.